Okay, I guess we can formally start the autumn 2020 edition of Social Computing. Welcome to the first lecture. A quick question before absolutely anything. How many of you have done remote studies as a participant? Just yell something in the chat window so I can see. Yell yes, no. Yes. That's a big row of yeses. That's excellent because I have actually never done any remote teaching. When the COVID pandemic hit in the spring, I was just done with all my teaching, and I was kind of thinking that, whew, I got saved from that nonsense. And now it's still here, and we have to do everything remotely. So I'm going to use you as my bunch of guinea pigs to see how this goes pretty ruthlessly. So let's see if we get any bright ideas on how to facilitate interaction during these classes. And I may actually turn to you in how do we do this. So what kind of interaction forms do you prefer and how do we do that? Classroom is such a fantastic and wonderful space to be in face-to-face, because like I said, I usually like to see people and I like to see how they react to when I say something stupid or something that I consider as being absolutely brilliant, but it just doesn't work online. So it's a very different modality of teaching or speaking, basically, because that's what we're doing here. I'm usually the one who does most of the speaking, but during these classes, we have historically tried to have a lot of interaction. So we pause the lectures, we do 10 minutes of talking in small groups, then we do another 10 minutes of talking publicly about the things that the small groups have been speaking about. So it's going to be different this time, I believe, because we don't have that classroom. But since all of you have already done this, I presume that you are at least more used to this than I am, so it's going to be just fine. Today, we have the first lecture. Basically, I'm going to spend a lot of time today on explaining the bureaucracy of the course. How will everything happen? How do we roll, especially this remote edition? And then we're going to do a couple of things that relate to social computing more. So I'm going to discuss humans. What are we and why this is relevant to social computing, and what are the specific characteristics of human that sort of cause, and what do they cause in computing system? And then we're going to discuss really briefly what are the type of social computing systems that are within the scope of this course. And this course is probably one of the most sort of human-centric courses that our study degree program has to offer. So there's a lot of algorithms, analysis, something else in other courses, but we talk a lot about design and humans on this course. Before we go into the introduction of the course protocols, I think it makes sense for me to introduce myself. So my name is Simo Hosio. I'm an associate professor and I lead a research group on something called crowd computing. So our research is on systems that use humans to solve tasks that are too difficult for computers to solve. The class has two TAs, teaching assistants, Jonas Oppenlander and Ville Paananen. And the division of work is pretty clear. So I do all the lectures and the nasty bureaucracy involved. So if you have any complaints about the course, or if you need some access to some systems that you don't have access to, all kinds of things that are not dealing with the practical coursework, you come to me. Now, anything that deals with the practical coursework, so the stuff that we'll be doing during the exercises, that belongs to the TAs. So Jonas and Ville will be taking care of that side of things. So take your complaints to them about practical work and about the lectures and about course bureaucracy and everything else. Come to me. Yeah, through that email that is there. That's usually the fastest way. Or, after these lectures, I'll stick around for a while and you can just talk to me. This is, by the way, probably the best thing about remote teaching. You're not allowed to bring coffee to the classrooms officially. Of course, people do. All right, so the official documentation, what are we supposed to be doing here? This is what we're supposed to be doing here. We're gonna try to learn how to analyze and design applications that are in one or more ways social, and hopefully for different contexts as well. We are going to try to understand the best practices and pitfalls in designing these things. And again, the focus is on design, not so much on implementation. So in many other courses, you will use programming languages to implement widgets, gizmos, applications that actually work. On this class, we're not going to be implementing things, but we're going to be designing things and thinking a lot about the design, whether it makes sense or not. Because usually when you start implementing stuff, the bulk of your time is going to go to fixing bugs and debugging and learning to implement. Obviously, during just a short course that spans just for one study period, that time is then away from doing the hard work of actually thinking about the design and thinking about the humans and the interface between humans and social systems, which are in the foci of this course. Then we're going to look into some of the positive and negative real-world consequences of social computing systems. And I think these days, like in 2020, this is more and more in the media. This is more and more becoming common knowledge, a popular knowledge, or a topic in the news media, like what are some of these, especially negative consequences of social systems. It's probably pretty safe to assume that most of you have read about the Facebook scandals and how social media or social networking sites have been used to affect, for example, elections in the States and so forth. Online bullying, stuff like this kind of phenomena that manifest mainly due to the very pervasive nature of social computing systems these days. So we're going to be looking at a bit of those, digging under the hood there. And then we're trying to explain our own behavior. So why do we do what we do with these systems? And that entails a little bit of diving into sociology and psychology. So as you can see, it's focused on very soft technical topics. It's about the humans and the social systems and trying to understand the world through the lens of this technology. In a nutshell, what do? You will get to see me through this stupid webcam a total of 6 times. And then the exercise is 8 times. So we have 6 lectures only. It's a relatively short course on that, in that sense. But the lectures will be then pimped up with some reading materials or even YouTube videos that you will have to be looking after the lectures so that you get exposed to some other content than my face as well. And then we have homework assignments. So most of the homework assignments will be completed during the exercises, but there will be some kind of teamwork that you have to do also outside of those, such as the mandatory reporting of things, but also the design exercises. So there's going to be a lot of designing involved in the exercises, and that design is something that you will basically do in groups. So that's the real simple version. Lectures. This housekeeping in the beginning and the end library. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so this is something that I want to ask from you, or ask you. Should I do these lectures live for 2 hours at a time, or should I record just videos and do only the housekeeping in the beginning? What do you prefer? So the options being that I actually record the videos, which is like me talking to an even emptier house, so just to the webcam with the slides, or do you want that we do these lectures live for 2 hours? Feel free to use the chat. I'm not gonna try to mind read. In any case, I will be doing the sort of housekeeping section live every single week, but should I go through the materials also live? Oh, you possibly cannot have escaped already. Live for 2 hours might be more natural. For me, the live option is fine. Yes, which yes is that? Wow, this is very nice. Live. Both are fine. Okay, quick poll leans toward doing this live. I'm happy with that as well. So we'll do it live then. Thank you for your cooperation / input. So in any case, I will post the reruns in Moodle, so it'll be accessible afterward as well if you can't make it this time every Tuesday. Labs and co-working time. Designing a social application, you do ideation, you do some kind of user research, you build the concept and you validate the concept and try to learn to sell it to others. So you optimally are trying to design a social computing system that makes some sort of sense and try to then come up with good sales talk why this would be the next billion-dollar venture. But Jonas and Ville will take this, I think it's next week, Thursday, the first exercise. So hopefully you can be there then. Moodle will be, of course, your playground for this as well. So all the information will be posted there. Homeworks, exercise homeworks. Jonas and Ville will inform you on that when the exercises start. I have 3 exercises for you, 3 homeworks. At the end of lectures 1, 3, and 5. Lecture 1 is today, as you may have guessed. You can choose a short reading package, which has either academic articles or things like TED Talks, or something like a bit less serious from the academical view, videos, articles, and you get to reflect on those. So you just read a bunch of materials or watch a bunch of materials and reflect your thoughts on those. And this is not so much to bully you into just doing something, but I actually read every single reflection personally because it helps me to keep tabs on what the class as a crowd thinks about the world. And the world, it just moves so bloody fast that, for example, you guys already think differently than I did 10 years ago. So it's this kind of reflections on how students perceive certain provocations or certain scientific ideas is really good way to understand how everyone in the room thinks. And that way steer the course a bit, for example, in terms of the topics that we'll be discussing in the future. Moodle, and then when you have teams, manage it wherever you want. We don't basically care, but again, Jonas and Ville will take care of this. My favorite part, participation. How do we make you talk and mingle? So in a classroom situation, this is easy, but like I said, I don't know how to make it work here really well. We have these breakout rooms, but it gets boring if we do like 12 breakout rooms every 2 hours. So let's see. Grading. Again, this is important for surprisingly many people. So no exam. Reflections are all mandatory, but they're only graded pass, fail. So all of the sort of grading in terms of numerical grades are going to be given based on the work done as a result of the exercises. Now, the exercises rely heavily on these lectures, on the other hand. So there is a lot of concepts that we are talking about here on the lecture, which we assume that you already know when you go to the lectures. The exercises. So in the exercises, there won't be, again, an introduction to the sort of broader framework of thinking about these things, but the exercises dive relatively fast into actual work, practical work. And those you don't want to then like quickly realize that you don't know what folks are talking about and you have to go and watch the lectures again. So watch the lectures. Do we have any questions at this point before we go into the actual topic of the first lecture? And it's fine to say no in the chat. I just like to see things moving on my screen other than just a timer. Let's start. Would somebody please say something just to entertain me? I heard a mouse click. That's it. Oh God, those questions are something that we can discuss in the end. Reflections don't need to be long, 200, 300, 400 words, just so that I can see that you have actually been thinking about the things. How to get 5? Do what Jonas and Ville tell you to do and do it well. That's how you get a 5. All right, housekeeping. We don't really have any housekeeping at this point. I'm going to direct you to tellusmore.fi if you want to win some rewards and help some of the studies that we are running as part of our research group, but that's got nothing to do with social computing as a class. I'm just leaving it here for something that you can think about later on. So today, let's get rolling with the first lecture. So, and we start with humans. So humans are interesting animals. So if you look at this, who knows what this is? Feel free to shout or use the chat. I'm not going to go to the next slide before I get something out of you, by the way.
It looks like some kind of party.
Absolutely. This is a nightclub in Oulu. Apparently, I wouldn't know anymore, but it is. This is a dog park. Who has seen this? I would assume quite a few people have seen this. It's the Tellus library at the Linnanmaa campus. So if we look at these 3 spaces, a peculiar element of us as humans is that it's possible to modify our social behavior by modifying the physical space. So the physical space where we are put, or which surrounds us, actually affects both of your expected as well as actual social behavior. So how you deal with humans is super much affected by surrounding expectations and the actual physical design of the space around you. If you look at the nightclub picture, it's probably not going to be the same kind of social environment as a dog park is or as the Tellus library is. So we are one of the only animals on this planet who are this heavily affected by the design of the physical space. Now, something happened a couple of decades ago when we started to get this lovely sandbox called the internet. We realized that also the design of the online space affects just as heavily, if not even more, your expected and actual behavior than the physical design does. So somewhere there emerged social computing as an area of computer science that is concerned with the intersection of social behavior and computational systems. What can we do with computational systems so that it takes advantage of our social behavior or somehow amplifies that in order to achieve something else? This is just a Wikipedia definition of social computing. Another one, perhaps a bit more engineering-minded definition, is systems that supports the gathering, representation, processing, use, and dissemination of information that's distributed across social collectivities such as teams, communities, organizations, and markets. So this is scientist talk. This is what researchers like to twist these words. So we have something really common sense things like how do you build computer systems that support sociality, and then you give that to a researcher and you get this monstrosity of a sentence or description of social computing. But these are just 2 sort of really nice ways to look at what we're dealing with in social computing in general. Ultimately, we're of course dealing with humans. So everything we're building, everything we're studying is of course for humans. So humans are obviously just one of the plethora of species that we have on the planet. Something happened at some point, and we started to evolve differently from the others. There is a fairly steep consensus that we are a unique species on the planet. Different ways how we are unique. There are various ways how we are unique, but one of the ways is that we are really good with tools. We know how to build and use tools. We are good at planning and having an ambition. Now, obviously, we cannot know the ambitions of animals because we cannot really read their minds that well quite yet. But still, it's relatively safe to say that humans are the #1 species who possess the cognitive capacity to project far into the future and build toward a better future. A lot of animals are characterized by this kind of short-term thinking where they're building just to survive, but humans are also building for ambition. We enjoy art. There's not a lot of animals who actually enjoy art, drawing funny things and looking at those in awe, like, oh my God, beautiful colors. Humans do that. And maybe one of the most important aspects of humans is that we are pretty good at passing forward accumulated knowledge. So we could not have developed as a species unless we learned to write and pass forward knowledge in a very efficient way. And then, of course, related to this course and above everything else, we are really social. And we build interesting rituals around our sociality. So you don't see this kind of rituals of marriage with other animals. If somebody gives a great talk, we have built these ideas of giving a standing ovation, and it's contagious. When everyone stands up and starts clapping, you do it as well because you are socially sort of pressured to do the same as the other people are doing. And equally similarly, we built these long-lasting ties, like for example marriage, and then we just one day decide to break those ties for silly reasons sometimes. And it's like you don't really see other animals doing this kind of stuff. You build along, you make like a social bond, and then you just one day decide that, okay, fuck it, no longer. So this is really unique human behavior. Culture, of course, matters. So we're not the same everywhere. Finnish people are very different than some other people. So these stereotypes have some ground truth to them, but the fact remains that we are social. And that fuels a whole class of computing systems that we are studying on this course specifically. So then about social computing systems. So as I started in the beginning, the physical space affects our sociality. And it's no surprise that we wanted to take the knowledge of the physical domain basically and try to build social computing systems that somehow amplify our sociality and enable us to do different kinds of things. So normally at this point we would stop for 2 to 3 minutes in groups to talk about what are the most important social tools. And I'm not going to ruin your thinking yet by telling what exact tools are we talking about here, but in general, what computational social tools do you use and what purposes for? Let's not do the group thing right now, but let's use the chat for this. So just spend 2 to 3 minutes and type all the social tools that you use and what purposes for in the chat, and I will just do a little bit of recap of that myself. So what computational tools do you use and for what purposes in your life that have a social element to them? And just use the chat for that. And I can easily say that, for example, I use WhatsApp with my parents far more than I ever used SMS or phone calls, because somehow it feels more effortless because it's basically free. Teams, for work-related stuff, it's supposed to be a social platform. So we have WhatsApp for messaging people, instant messages, social media, interacting people, Zoom to listen and interact with lectures, Discord for communicating with friends, Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, Discord gaming. Gaming is a big one. I'm surprised to see it only once there. Tinder for obvious reasons, yes. Twitter, yep. Couple of things. Facebook, because I'm that old, yes. Okay, I think that gives a fairly good approximation of what's going on. So instant messages are, of course, one of the things that most people mention. Images have become a big thing. So our communication has become far more visual during the past couple of years because of social media platforms have been evolving in the internet. Instagram, in particular, I think made visual communication the sort of new norm. Facebook started, I don't think it started, there were this photo sharing applications like Flickr and stuff where people started actually putting their photo albums. But Facebook is trying to sort of capture all of the spectrum of video, images, chat, and they're doing it scarily well. But most people use, of course, just direct messaging and then some other platforms. And this is to be expected in a way. The reason why I'm asking this here is that usually this same thing actually happens every year. So it's about interpersonal communication that people use social computing tools for. But there is an entire different class of social computing tools that are interesting also to think from the perspective of how to leverage our social characteristics in building software, for example, in the business domain. Now, as is typical with academic courses, we try to make sense of things in a bit more controlled fashion. So an easy way to think about social computing systems is to use two axes of place and time. So when we talk to people, there's a pretty intuitive but sort of rough categorization to be done about time and place. We have systems that operate in same time, same place, different time, same place, same time, different place, different time, different place. Most of the systems that you were right now writing to the chat can be easily placed into one or more of these domains. So if you think of, for example, WhatsApp, it can be same time, different place if you happen to be online at the same time. But at the same time, it works actually in different place and different time because it's also asynchronous. You can just respond to messages later on. And so if you start to think about not even necessarily a computational system, but a communication channel, such as a notice board, you can use this kind of simple categorization of those systems to start putting them into different mental boxes in your mind. What are they? And this is a very important distinction with social computing systems specifically, because when you start to design a system, initially you want to know exactly the box it belongs to, because it always has some ramifications for the design of those systems. Now, two technical revolutions from the perspective of social computing recently are the web and the smartphone. So before we had iPhones and Android phones, the web was already pretty heavily disrupting the communications. So we didn't have to use snail mail anymore. And we had all these Web 2.0 properties where we could yell and scream and leave comments. Social networking sites were already popping up before smartphones. But then smartphones really like exploded the bank in the proverbial sense of things. So we had the internet in our pockets. So the applications that we have on our smartphones, that's actually relatively uninteresting, and it's a small increment to having the internet in your pocket. So as long as you have a browser, the apps are just making things convenient, but the fundamental properties of you being able to communicate with people haven't changed really since the first iPhone, because that's when we had the internet in our pocket. We often think that these fairly recent technological increments by Apple and friends are something really new and cutting edge because the media tells us so. But that couldn't be further from the truth. So if we think, for example, this video calling, it's not a new thing. In the 50s, IBM Bell Labs already was introducing this picture phone set, and then it didn't work in the 50s, so they tried again at the end of 60s, and it didn't still work because the time wasn't just right for it. So then at some point, it became convenient enough that we now accept it as part of our smartphone shenanigans. So we just take the phone and we do like this when we're supposed to be watching the traffic or something. I see kids cycling to school, like elementary school kids cycling to school with their faces like this because they're doing a video call with some buddies in the morning. That's just insanity. That's how it goes. And then Skype really actually took it mainstream in the end. Skype is already now forgotten. Nobody uses Skype anymore, with the odd exception in the bunch. But still, Skype is really the sort of technology that took video calling mainstream. And since that, it's been everywhere. Now, again, in an attempt to sort of dig deeper into the inter workings of the social computing systems, a very nice example is shared calendars. A shared calendar is simply when you provide someone access to your calendar. This is very common in the workplace, and it's on the surface, it feels like a simple idea. So sure, you have a bunch of people who provide open access to their calendars, and it's supposed to be making scheduling simple. And this is a fantastic example of a social computing system. It's pretty much like a groupware for a bunch of somehow connected people to coordinate things together, which makes it a really nice social computing system. But if you see my calendar and you see a red slot there that I'm not available, it doesn't mean that I'm not available. It means that I'm not available for you. Now, what if a very important person asks me, if Lenny Kravitz asked me that, are you available for coffee next Thursday? I will cancel my meetings and I will go for coffee with Lenny Kravitz. Right. So it depends on the people that you're asking. This kind of red block on a shared calendar doesn't mean anything without the social context of the situation. Who am I blocking that time for? I often block time for myself. I have calendar entries every single week where I have work for stuff, blah, work for that thing, look at that paper. So on the surface, it looks like I'm not available, and most likely I'm not. But for the right person and for the right thing, yes, I am. So it's not that simple, and it depends on the social context. Your work gets done when there is no calendar entries. So you don't actually want to have a shared calendar where everyone can just book slots. So you would need to somehow have control over the people who are allowed to use that shared calendar and when. And finally, in order for a shared calendar to work, everyone has to use that calendar. So if you use a different calendar, you're not using the same shared calendar, the whole system falls apart. So you might have spent a lot of time implementing and designing a flawless shared calendar application for a group or for a workplace. And then when 2 people out of the 15 people in the team don't use it, the whole bloody thing falls apart. So these kind of things that you cannot easily factor into design of software have to be, you have to know about this in order to design good social software. And shared calendar is such a magnificent example of a simple technology. Any student can implement this technically. Hopefully, you should be able to implement this at least by the time you graduate. But it just doesn't work unless you take into account the social context and the social nature of work as well. And there's this concept of disparity of work and benefits. So that it requires people who don't benefit themselves from its use. So for example, if I have a really good memory and I just don't need a calendar, I'm still mandated to use these things if everyone else in my workplace wants to use this. That's not the case, of course, but still. Here's another one. This is a social playground. If you collaborate on a document, either asynchronously with Word or you use something better like Google Docs or Overleaf, you see who has done edits. It brings a social aspect to your authoring work. If I give birth to the most magnificent sentence on the planet, and then I see random Teemu Hannula or Jyrki or Jere Kinnunen editing that document and changing that sentence, it changes the social dynamics of my work because it makes it personal. So even this kind of trivial thing like editing documents, adding a social layer to that, first of all, makes it more efficient, of course, because it's better to write together important documents, but at the same time, it introduces tension. So all of these are trade-offs that you have to consider when you try to analyze the systems. And unfortunately, we are rather sensitive about these things, and we don't know who are sensitive about these things. So it just adds to the complexity of the problem because you don't know who might get offended by, for example, that you edit the sentence. And these feel like small things, but they're all parts of the social fabric that has to be woven into this software. And it's just really nice to be knowledgeable or aware of these things when you're designing stuff. So now what has happened is that it's a horrendous mix of things. We don't anymore have individual services that cater to one audience and for one purpose, but we have these mashups of services where one service provides the comment capabilities, one service provides the streaming platform, integrates with another service where you have, for example, a second screen, which is being used for some other functionality. So it's a big network of social networks that somehow play together. And this allows humans to do all sorts of wonky things, and it gives birth to this really weird internet phenomena that come in waves. And it's the interesting part about this is that quite often we blame the systems. The systems do this, the systems do that. Facebook does this, and it's because we have Twitter, that's why we have like online bullying or something like that. But it's not so much that, but it's that these systems just surface, of course, our own behavior. They amplify what we already have inside us, and they bring forward possibly the worst of us, and sometimes the best of us, and sometimes the sort of funny aspects of us. So it just basically amplifies our unique characteristics. I have this on autoplay, so if anyone is using, actually looking at the slides, they get a share of share of nice video to watch, but we have this weird internet phenomena that come and go, and sometimes they stick for a year. You are getting rickrolled if you replay the slides. I probably didn't include the computer audio here because I get so many notifications all the time, but I should have, so you would have been rickrolled live. But the phenomenon come and go, and it's really difficult to explain. And what's happening is that everything just happens faster and in bigger volume. So if you look at this guy, basically broke the YouTube view counter, because everyone was just watching this video like crazy. And this would not have been possible just a few years ago. We didn't have the technical infrastructure to stream video to billions of people over just a couple of months. And it's just, there wasn't this big network of social networks to amplify a message. So basically, watch Gangnam Style. It's, if you think of it, it's just a message that we relay from one human to another human. Oh, this is bloody funny. Have a look at this. You release it on one social network, it leaks into other networks, So everything just happens all the time, faster and faster in the internet. And this is the sort of development that is really fascinating to look at right now. Because to be fair, not everyone on this planet still has even access to the internet. So we are still we're very much in the development stage of the internet, and it remains to be seen over the next 10 or 20 years what happens when everyone on this planet has access to the internet. So this amplified development is not going to be ending anytime soon. So that's the internet. And then the mobile phones. There was a lot of buzz some years ago that mobile phones are making us dumber. There have been studies that argue, they don't prove anything, they argue that we are getting dumber when we look at just the human who loses an access to the mobile phone. So we do have a shorter attention span. We cannot maybe solve any more math problems that we were able to do 20 years ago. But at the same time, it's a trade-off. We have this ridiculously amazing access to other humans and information all the times at our fingertips. So you often hear this sort of disgruntled opinion that mobile phones are bad for you, but you would be pretty helpless without a mobile phone these days. You can navigate because of a mobile phone. You have the map in your pocket. You can translate languages because of the mobile phone. The real distinction here is to try to think. Obviously, there is no right or wrong answer. That is this now part of me, or is this a device that I can get rid of? Mobile phone is affordable in the Western world. You can get it. You can use it day in, day out. You're connected to the internet. Now, is it fair to say that you are somehow being lessened or you're being reduced as a human being as a result of using this thing? Or are you being greatly amplified because of the provided access by this thing? Again, that's something that is totally up to debate, and we can talk about it for ages, but there's just two sides to this coin, whether mobile phones are bad or good. And then the social aspect of mobile phones. What is being social? You see a person these days who is staring at the mobile phone in a metro or a bus or somewhere, and you think that that person is not social. He's not talking to the person next to, person sitting next to him or her. And so what is being social? We just wrote a bunch of things in the chat where provenly you and I and probably most people consider it as being social when we are actually using the mobile phone in order to socialize with people. So the whole notion of human sociality has been changing as a function of these technologies because we can communicate with those. And then how do we leverage these human social characteristics? Who has seen Dig? It used to be popular back in the days before they screwed up the UI and down it went. So basically, we can share the interesting ideas asynchronously with others online. Dig is a good example of a system that is super simple. The best social governance systems are always simple and very open-ended. So they allow for humans to express and sort of invent new features in a community-driven way. And Dig was really fairly straightforward in this sense. So you just leave bookmarks there, and then you have this very simple thumbs up, thumbs down algorithm, which basically exploits wisdom of the crowds so that the interesting stuff bubbles up. Interesting stuff to the community that uses Dig, not of course to the global community, but that's simple enough. So this is leveraging sort of very, very simple techniques of just majority opinion on what is interesting. Same thing here on this class. If we have 30 people online, there is some kind of a common denominator among us, all of us here online, what we think collectively as the most interesting, I don't know, food in Finland, or what's the best student party in Oulu, or whatever. Those kind of things, we can try to design systems to tease out the majority vote of a community. Reddit is doing the same in a far bigger scale these days. And then there's Twitch. So Amazon bought Twitch at some point. Why do you think that is? Why did Amazon buy Twitch? And it's too simple to say that to make money. Well, those are actually pretty spot on answers. So it's a growing platform and social platform and the advertisement elements. So these days you buy access to people. It's not so much about the technology. Think about Amazon. They can implement a Twitch with their left hand in a couple of weeks if they want. It's the engineering and the back end is there, but Twitch became a phenomenon where you have 100 million people and you have a very strong social element and you have a very strong community behind it. So you're actually buying access to the community and the social sort of vibe or the social elements that have already been ingrained to that community. And as a result, you can skip the queue, so to say. So if you try to build another Twitch and make those 100 million people move from the platform to another one, it's just not going to happen because they have a social bond between the community members already in this one platform. So it makes very good sense for Amazon to buy access to this kind of social capital, which is already on a platform. And it's really weird because it's invisible. You cannot see social capital. You see a count, like this is how many users we have, but there is something behind that number. There's this invisible layer of culture, social behavior, social norms on a given platform. Just like in the beginning, we were saying that this design of the online environment affects how you behave there. So there's this whole invisible world of social norms and behaviors on these platforms, and that's the actual juicy bit for buying this kind of platform, for instance. Not so much the technology, which obviously is cool as well. So now that Amazon buys this, they can include it as an SDK to their own application development tools. So you can basically have Twitch streaming integrated in a mobile game by using Amazon's SDK, which again, if you want to get access to this social capital, the biggest social capital gaming pool on the planet, you have to use Amazon's SDK to have to be able to stream directly to there. So it's just a brilliant move of buying basically this invisible resource. Who knows this? Rings any bells? So Cicada 3301 was this internet puzzle, which was, it's a really cool story. It's included in the first reflection package if this is what you want to get into. So this kind of a treasure hunt game online, which just again was a very, very elaborate game, and the phenomenon that was spawned around this game of treasure hunt was also a story in itself. So a lot of people got together, anonymous people who don't know each other got together to try to solve this kind of internet puzzle, and these just make for a really fascinating stories. Okay, a few words about social media, and we're almost done for today, actually. Social media in 2020. From our perspective, we are mostly interested in this kind of, I'm not going to say boring, but I'm going to say boring anyway, boring labels to these things. Blogs, emails, instant messaging, social network services, wikis, social bookmarking. This is what we are interested on this course. Obviously, these are higher level, broader categories, and then under these we have always this kind of interesting phenomena and interesting stories, interesting services. But these are sort of the higher level services that we're interested in, and this is an important part. So social media is not good or bad. We as humans have a tendency to label things the simple way. That's just how our brains are wired. We try to make sense of the world by simplifying things into black and white, and that's almost never the case. But most people will have an opinion on whether social media is good or bad. But it's both and it's neither. It just is. It is what it is. So, for example, with social media, there's a lot of work being done on aspects of mental health, whether it's actually ruining your mental health or whether it's helpful. And again, it's totally both. There are legit ways to use social media to cope with difficult situations in life. It's an excellent place to find, for instance, peer support if you know how to operate it well, or if you go to the right places. But at the same time, it can be ruinous for your mental health. So we always have to, as members of the academic community, as people who are supposedly who should have a more nuanced understanding of these things, we always have to look at both of the sides and try to identify the things that fall into what cluster. It's not good or bad. Obviously, again, there's a big thing going on about hate speech currently and all of this cancel culture online. They are all phenomena that are real and that we have to recognize. And yet at the same time, we cannot label the entire class of social media or social networking systems as good or bad. So why this is included here is just because I want to make it clear that the purpose of any of these lectures or any of the papers that you will be reading here is to simplify things into these labels, but all of these are just phenomena that we have to be able to differentiate from the noise and from the sensational clickbait news articles. So therefore, as academics, again, we often try to take this abstraction, or we sort of take this consideration into an abstract level higher. Instead of staring at individual happenings or individual events that take place, we need to look at the system as a whole. And with social computing systems, if we want to, for example, think how to build functional social media systems, we have this building block model by Geatsman, and it's called Social Media Get Serious, Understanding the Functional Building Blocks of Social Media. So if you look at the graph, it looks a bit like honeycomb, but bees typically produce those. You can try to think of social media systems from the perspective of building blocks, a bit like Legos. And you have to get a certain number of those right in order for the platform to actually start to function, so that people don't abandon it and you don't have to be spending money all the time to get more people using it. So for example, LinkedIn, we have identity, relationship, and reputation as the key driving factors of the platform. YouTube, we have sharing, conversations, and reputation groups, which are some kind of a driving factors for YouTube to succeed. Now, Facebook is doing something really well. So it's doing conversations and reputation and presence and relationships. One of the big things in Facebook in the beginning was this: somebody is in a relationship with someone. So it was the first one to sort of very boldly declare, again, your important human relationships with each other. And that's what partially made it notorious and famous, because you could also see like breakups from there. And we are curious. We want to see what our buddies are up to. So this kind of simple things that you can include in your designs to make a platform take off from the higher abstract and perspective. Be as it may, it's a shift in control. The shift in control is an interesting aspect. So because of the mass effect, basically. So we have everyone on social media, and you get this pressure to do something that the social media, I hate to use the word mob, but since the mob is used a lot in the sort of contemporary hubbub online, I'm just going to use that. If the social media mob pressures you to do something, or even pressures your employer to do something, or pressures another employer to, or pressures a brand to do something, it's a shift in control. If you think the time before social media, it's the executives who make all the calls based on some kind of acquired understanding of what the audience wants. Well, now with social media, the audience may change what it wants in a matter of weeks or even days. So day one, you have a product or a brand doing something, and a week from that, your audience suddenly demands that you do something else. And it is actually in your best interest to serve your audience and change your strategy. And this never happened before social media, because you would have to do some kind of a market research, try to find out what your audience wants. Your audience never really had a way to coordinate their sort of hive mind thinking about what they want. But now social media connects everyone. And it's like a swarm of birds or a school of fish. You can suddenly change the course. And so there is this clear shift in control of things. And it can be pretty scary, because social media has such a big impact on product decisions, for example. And I just recently read from Finnish media about these scandals, so-called scandals, about some brands that were, the social media mob was trying to get Kärkkäinen to remove some brands from the store and blah, blah, blah. I didn't read it that carefully, but still this phenomena is the same thing, that the social media starts to demand something, and you are not forced to comply, but you are essentially forced to at least give a response to the social media. So it's a power shift. Now, creativity is a topic, and creating things together is a thing. How do we create things together? Social media is empowering, obviously, this line of work in a big way. Social media spawns this kind of collaborative creation of culture as well as media. And there's a specific branch of science that also deals with crowds creating something together, which is called crowdsourcing. So Wikipedia, for instance, it's created by a collective bunch of people in a social manner. the ties between Wikipedia editors are pretty weak, but yet there is a social coordination, especially among the editing force. Most people don't pay attention to it, but there is a big bunch of editors in Wikipedia who are actually coordinating the creation of everything and approving and deleting the individual content that the sort of bigger audience is creating. So it's also socially coordinated creation. This I just added yesterday in here. This is interesting. So I have to read this. In an extraordinary and somewhat devastating discovery, it turns out virtually the entire Scots version of Wikipedia, comprising more than 57,000 articles, was written, edited, and overseen by a netizen who clearly had nay the slightest idea about the language. Someone pulled off the best practical prank of the century by editing the Scottish Wikipedia according to Random Scottish, which is not actually Scottish, just replacing Y with an E and so forth. So what this is highlighting is that the hive mind is often wrong. So you can do stuff with a big bunch of people and you have the power to create, but it's a big ship that can also go horribly wrong. Idea generation together. One of our last examples of what social computing systems can do is just when you're firing blanks. If you need to start planning something, where do you go for ideas? You go for the social networks. You either go for the people that you trust or you go to random people. So last week, I, for example, wanted to get ideas on what to give students as prizes or rewards in academic studies or raffles. We used to always raffle UNS lunch tickets, but now that most people are not on campus anyway, we can't do that. We used to raffle Finkino tickets, but somehow even movie theater feels wrong right at this moment. So I went to Yodel to ask, like, what can we give as prizes to students? And lo and behold, the most wanted item was a gift card to the S group. So this is like super practical ways of tapping into the brains of just the right people in order to figure out what kind of, or in order to get ideas for something. Is this the right thing, by the way, to give? If you have any other ideas, what kind of raffle prizes you would like to win, feel free to use the chat. Right now, I'm gravitating toward, unfortunately, Arena gift cards. Nonetheless, the one takeaway from this very brief intro lecture is that the internet and mobile technology have really, in a big time, revolutionized how we connect with each other, and we're still at the beginning. So internet is like, it's almost like a teenager, if you think of it. It's 20 years old, 25 years old. And that's not very old. And like I said, we don't really have the internet even yet globally available. So there are 1/3 of the planet is still disconnected from the internet. So even though it feels like we have already everything online, and especially like media likes to talk about this new technologies like Neuralinks, where you just insert something into your brain and you connect to VR and you do whatever. We're really in the beginning still. We haven't had internet. For example, my parents didn't have internet when they were young. We still have a lot of people alive who have never experienced internet as kids, which means that it's still going to take a couple of generations for us to really see what's life like for people who have had internet from the beginning. And it's a good time to be alive in that sense, because you get to actually design these systems. You get to have a say either through being a consumer or hopefully being a producer of social computing systems. Because it's a really democratic world. Internet is open and it's pretty easy to just deploy things there. So this is the main takeaway from the first lecture here. And then in the future lectures, we're going to be diving deeper into more niche areas here. Do we have any questions at this point? I will have to say that this is progressing much faster than it does in a classroom situation. Usually it takes 1.5 hours to go through all of this, but that's because we always stop to talk there. And this feels like it's just me doing the talking. So maybe in the next lectures, we'll do a couple of service breaks and do those breakout rooms. But other than that, do you have any questions at this point before I reveal the first reading package? I take that as a no. So the first reading package, I'm gonna release it in Moodle later tonight. And the idea is to choose 3 of those items that I have included below. But you have to do it so that you have items from both of the categories. So you cannot do only 3 from the bottom category or 3 from the upper category, but you have to take 2 and 1. So the upper category is strictly scientific articles. So it's academics writing academic work which has been peer reviewed and published somewhere. So you get to expose into a bit more the scientific thinking behind social computing. Now the lower category is then a bit more, let's say, relaxed content. So there's a TED talk and some blog posts and then really cool videos on the cicada phenomenon. And choose 3 of these. And in Moodle, I will open the homework exercise later today where you can just write your reflection directly there. In Moodle, I will also provide a zip file for these articles in case they are behind paywalls and you can't get access to them otherwise. If you're in the university network, you can get access to that, but as I understand, at least some people will be at home and you don't have necessarily VPN access. So I'm just going to provide them in a zip file as well. You have, I believe, 10 days to complete this. So 10 days to read 3 articles or, well, 3 items of these divided to 2 categories and provide a few hundred words of reflection in Moodle should be quite doable. In fact, you can probably get started already now if I release it during the next 5 minutes because we still have half an hour time left. Next up is probably the next lecture during next week because we don't have an exercise session yet this week. And as far as I'm concerned, this first lecture is over and out. Feel free to stick around if you have any questions. I'll be still here for a couple of minutes. If not, click the red button. And I thank you for participating today. I'm going to kill my video. But stick around to ask questions if you have.